2 minutes before David was supposed to come around the corner, Rio stepped out in full view of the men in the van. He was 2 feet from the bumper, a smile on his face lighting up his deep dimple on his cheek. "Looks like you two need a lift," Rio said, squatting down, his hands gripping the metal bumper. The guards inside scrambled for the door, but just then Rio lifted the van up. With a grunt, he pushed the 10-ton vehicle off his chest, knocking it on its back end, where the doors were. Screams and the sounds of tumbling bodies echoed from inside the van. Laughing, Rio walked around the vehicle. There were 2 front doors where the men could potentially exit once they'd recovered from the tumble. Rio pulled back his fist and launched it at the crease of the door, tangling the metal into itself. Well, now they weren't getting out of that door. It wouldn't open with that kind of damage. Rio ambled around to the other side. "Once you knuckleheads get through the window, then I'll be ready to go toe-to-toe," he said. However, after that display of power, it was likely the men inside the van weren't eager to escape and meet Rio's fist. Morgan pushed off the brick wall where he was leaning. In 1 minute David Sanders would be strolling around the corner. At his back, he heard a loud crash that made him jump. He turned, expecting to see a collision. Imagine his surprise when he saw Haiku's van toppled over, resting on its back end. Rio Hernandez laughed as he strolled around the vehicle, sizing up the damage he'd just done. Damn, that guy was strong. But he could still be taken out. Morgan pointed his tranquilizer gun in Rio's direction, just as a blast of snow blew in his face. "Rio just has to show off," Connor said, exhaling, his breath misting in the cold air. "Yeah, I really thought he'd fight the guards. This was a bit flashier of an approach. We're definitely going to attract some attention," Zephyr said. "The Lucidites will find a way to cover it up," Connor said, turning his attention in the direction of where David was supposed to materialize in just a moment. Connor and Zephyr walked around a corner where a brick wall took up most of the city block. David would be coming around the opposite corner any second. A flurry of snow swirled around the bend, making Connor's eyes burn. The flakes blasted him in the face, but just then he caught the form of a man several feet away. The snow covered the man for a moment, making his presence known. "Oh, no, not that guy," Zephyr said, holding up his hand. "The Invisible Man?" Connor said, sliding down into a fighting stance. "Good to see you again, Zephyr. I've been meaning to return the favor for what you did to my shoulder," a disembodied voice said, followed by a click. Connor knew that click. He'd been around guns, had them held up to his head. "No!" he yelled, knocking into Zephyr, pushing him away as he held up his hand. A heat scorched in his palm just before a bolt of fire soared out of his skin. It shot forward, connecting with the invisible figure, lighting him up at once. The fire continued to pour from Connor's hand as a man strode around the corner, his eyes going wide at the sight before him. David Sanders shot backward as the man in front of him rose up in flames. The fire ran over his clothes and covered his head. Connor had no idea what was happening to him, but the fire felt never-ending as it flowed effortlessly from him, fueling his fear, feeding his need to protect, powering his desire to be great. "That's enough," Zephyr boomed into Connor's ear. Instantly, as though controlled by his words, Connor dropped his hand, and the fire halted. The man who had been invisible continued to burn, and the few people on the street, including David and Rio, just watched. Then David lifted his hand, and over the burning man ice flakes fell, slowly dampening the fire. Still the burning man crumpled to the pavement, his body black and bloody from the fire. Connor had done that. Driven by his instinct, a white and blue fire had poured from him. Fire so hot and heavy it could cover a person instantly. He backed up, overwhelmingly horrified by what he'd done. But he'd saved Zephyr from being shot, and that's what mattered most.